Thank you. See if we can get this adjusted. Everybody, is that okay? Right there?
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Matt Keim. I'm probably been turning, I don't know, 12 years or so. Probably joined just like a lot of you guys. I was a woodworker first. I was at Hibden Hardwoods at their annual sale, and somebody's running around with a little goblet they had turned, and I pulled him aside and asked him what it was, and he invited me to a meeting just like this in St. Louis. And the next day I went to the meeting, and when I left, my wife was the new editor of their newsletter, and I was in line for office. The first meeting I was there, I don't know how, sometimes you get suckered in pretty quick. At that time I already owned 3 lathes, but I hadn't used any of them yet. I went to an auction, and I knew I wanted to do wood turning, and it was a silent auction, so I bid on all the lathes there. I was the only one that bid on them. So I had 2 Olivers and a Powermatic, to try to haul home the next day. So they ended up in storage for a couple years, and then after that I got them out, and it's kind of been a strong addiction and love for wood turning ever since. So if you ever get to St. Louis, you go by Craft Alliance. They've always got quite a bit of my work there. If you ask them, they might have 25 pieces, but it's a gallery, so they might only have 5 out at a time. So if you tell them you're interested, they'll go back and pull any artist's work out, and they try to keep cycling. If you ever sell through galleries, you'll notice you'll do a lot better in galleries who really keep up with cycling inventory, whether that's you providing the inventory and then back and forth, or if you're able to give them a volume, and they'll cycle it in and out of what's displayed. Because things get stagnant on a shelf, and if it's there too long, people who buy at galleries frequently are frequent shoppers. So if you ever try to sell, make sure you get in a gallery that knows how to sell and that knows how to promote you and keep your work coming in and out. So today we're going to start out with basic bowl turning. So we've got some hard maple I'm going to turn, and we'll just do my process to rough a bowl out. So typically I cut all my wood. It's easy to get, green wood is free. The only time I buy wood is if it's somehow spectacular figured, so I buy burls, and if I come across a figured log or something, I might buy that. But for the most part, I've got a couple people in St. Louis, a couple tree trimmers that set stuff out back for me. And Sam Moon, he owns Moon Wood Turnings, architectural wood turning in Pacific, Missouri, which is where I live, and he sets stuff out for me as well. So helps if you build relationships. They'll start paying attention to what grains you're interested in and what species, and they'll start setting them out for you. So majority of the time I use a screw chuck. A face plate for most of you is probably a better way to go. It's a little safer, especially if you're new. You get a stronger hold, but I'll use the tailstock. At home I don't use the tailstock very often for when I screw chuck. But if you're just starting out, you certainly want to. Or if you get any size, I'll use a screw chuck up to about 15-inch diameter. After I get over that, then I shift to a faceplate just so I don't have to worry about it. A faceplate actually is better in respect to being able to get the right angle for your cuts. So when you use a tailstock, you have to manipulate the handle and the tool more to get a good cut because the tailstock's in your way. So if you use a faceplate, you don't really need a tailstock as long as you secure it properly. So if you do that, I always use sheet metal screws, non-self-tapping. They're hardened so that they're stronger. Don't use drywall screws because they're hardened too brittle, so they'll snap right off. Don't use wood screws because they're not hardened hardly at all, and they'll break easily. So if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or any hardware store, I think I have some here, and just get these hex head screws that are for sheet metal. You can get them all different diameter sizes. I use a little impact to drive them in for when I do face plates. It's a very strong hold. I teach at Craft Alliance. We have a gallery down off of Grand. I teach about 8 4-week classes a year there, and all of my students are beginners. Most of them have never picked a tool up in their life. They just want to try something new. We always use face plates and those screws. I've never had one come off yet. And if you know beginners and students, they are rough, so especially the guys. I always cringe when I get 8 men in class because they all want to get done before the next guy. They all want to take the biggest cut. I wonder if I can get at least half women, they pay a little closer attention to form. And I always say men, we mostly make flower pots when we're starting out, and the ladies step back and they actually pay attention to form a little better than we do. We're way too interested in how quickly we can get it done. So what we're going to do first here is we're just going to rough out the outside shape. I'm going to use basically an Ellsworth grind. So I use a jig to sharpen this. I just, David Ellsworth came to town a few years ago and I just bought his sharpening jig, use it with the Wolverine. And it's just a quick, I can touch it up very easily. It's always consistent, always the same, and I can take a very big cut. So at home I've got a good sized lathe. I've got a 3 horsepower motor on it now and I'm getting ready to upgrade it to a 5. And basically, for new guys I wouldn't recommend that, but if you do a lot of bowls and you want to start powering through them, you don't want the lathe slowing down on you at all. There's risk at doing that. You have to be a better turner and understand that you don't hang the tool over the tool rest very far. So if you move to even a 3 horsepower motor, you don't want to give your lathe leverage. So make sure you're keeping your tool rest up close to the work. So I'm let's see if I can figure this one out. I don't pay real close attention to RPMs. Well, my lathe doesn't even display them, so I don't pay any attention at home. I'm just looking for balance. So right now we're a little out of balance just because I have more bark on one side than the other. So the key on any time you're making a bowl, the outside of a bowl, unless you're doing ingrained, all your cuts are going to be smoother if I work from this side towards the rim. That's where I have supported grain. The longer fibers are here because the diameter of the bowl is larger on this side than it is on this side. So you're going to have a supported cut. The grain's supported this way. So it's really not important so much right now because if I had a bad cut, I've got a lot of wood to remove. But the further and further and closer you get to a finished bowl, you want your cuts to be going that direction. It's going to give you the smoothest cut, the least amount of sanding, which is something we should all want. So we're just going to use this. I'm going to start to level it out. Take it pretty slow. I feel like I should have a tarp hanging back here. So when I'm at home, I'm going to take a very deep cut, very quick, and I might shave this whole thing in 3 cuts. Here we don't want to do that because I'll be shoving that to the back of the wall. But as long as you hold the tool properly and you're following that bevel, you're getting the handle down, you're keeping this close, you can take a pretty deep cut without any concern. The problem comes in when you start trying to cut below center, trying to cut way above center, or you're hanging way over, and you're changing the whole dynamic of how you're approaching the wood. Then you're going to start to have catches. But as long as, if you can see I'm right above center, so I always prefer to cut on or right above center. That's where you should be. A little above is better. I have the tool fairly open. A lot of people don't like this tool because it's a catcher, right? And mostly on the inside of a bowl because you stop paying attention when you're going around the inside of the bowl and you catch that left wing. And once you do, you really can't control it. It's going to suck it in. On the outside of the bowl, this particular tool is much safer. It's much more difficult to have such a big catch. But I'm holding it fairly open. I'm not holding on for dear life. And I'm just taking maybe a 3/8 cut, not very big. When I turn it home, I use up to a 3/4 inch diameter gouge, so a little larger than what I'm using here. This is a 5/8. We're going to move a little closer. So notice I keep moving my tool rest closer. It's really important that you continue to keep leverage on your side. I'll speed it up in a minute here and then it won't slow down. I have it going pretty slow so you don't get near as much torque. Alright. So same thing, we're just trying to get it balanced. I'm going to go ahead and speed it up a little bit. I think I can. A little bark. No, it'll work. It'll work. The bark just fell out of the hole. The other thing about wood turning is it's extremely safe. Don't get shook. So you notice, it kicked and even it moved the tool rest back. But there's no reason, there's very few instances. It happens, but it's very few instances on a lathe that you're really at some great risk. usually when I've seen people get hurt, it's because they scared themselves and they dropped their tool. I watched someone turn in a hat, flip a half-inch gouge over his shoulder and back down his back. I don't even know how it happened. You know, we were taking a class with Johannes Mikkelsen. I was on the lathe next to him, and all of a sudden I just see the gouge go up, around, and back down. He had the tool rest about that far, maybe 5 inches away from the wood. So for sure, it started with that. But you know, the key on wood turning, it's very safe. So it looks like maybe 3/8 about as big as this lathe will let me take. We're not in a hurry, so it doesn't really matter. You can see I'm not paying a lot of attention to how smooth my cut is. I'm not stopping and checking it yet. There's no reason to. I still have a lot of wood to remove. All my cuts are going in the proper direction so that I don't get a bunch of tear out that I then have to try to fix later on. So I'm just going to try to level it, continue leveling it up. The closer I get it, this lathe is closer to my height. You know, they always say the lathe should be at your elbow. At home, my lathe is set probably 4 inches lower than this, maybe 3. I don't know why. I got comfortable doing it teaching. I teach on mini lathes at Craft Alliance, so I got so comfortable turning low. Maybe my back will yell at me in the future, but I got so comfortable turning it on these little mini lathes that all my students are. You know, a lot of my students are 5 foot and 5'5". I just lowered my lathe and feel comfortable. So as I get it closer, I'll start defining where my foot's going to be. I always make a 2-step foot on a bowl. It's more important as I get closer on the second half, after it's dry and I finish it, than it is right now, because this bowl is just going to be waxed and set on a shelf. Or a lot of times I'll put bowls in those bags you get at Lowe's for leaves. You know, it's a double layered bag. They're very tall. And if you get wood that's been laying around a while, maybe it's been out in the field, you can rough turn bowls, put them in there with no wax. They've already lost the bulk of their moisture. You know, maybe they're sitting around 30% now. And within about a month, they'll dry and you can finish turn them, and you don't have to wait the full amount of time if you want a round bowl. You know, if you don't care if you have oval bowls, you just finish turn them the first time. That's okay. All right, so you can see this is hard maple. It turns very, very smooth. You know, I love hard maple. It's a little more of a bear when it's dry, but when it's wet, it turns very, very easily. So if you ever come across like a sugar maple, rock maple, something like that, red maple is a nice one. It's a little softer. Pick it up because it's a very nice turning wood. So now we're at least bowl shape. I still have some bark here on the edge of my foot, so I need to do something there. I don't want bark where I'm going to grab it. I've got a black line there. You want to pay attention that's not a crack, and it's not. If it's a crack, I want to get all that out. You know, so for me, especially on functional bowls, no cracks of any kind. If I'm finishing a bowl and I see a crack, it goes in the fire pile. You know, it's I sell everything I make, and I don't want anything coming back. You know, so anytime I see a crack, no matter how far along into it I am, if it's going to be a functional piece, for sure, I throw it away. If it's a burl and it's a thin turn bowl, you're going to have some of that, and then I'll do something with it, and it's going to be a decorative piece anyway. They're thin, and if I have to fill it a little bit, I'm okay with that. But on functional pieces, you can't have any cracks. Prefer not to have knots in them. If you do, you probably should give them away instead of sell them, because they're pretty surely going to fail. All right, so we're close enough now. You know, you want to step back. The shape is not super important right now because it's just a rough out. You know, we're going to set this on a, you know, I'm going to wax it, put it on a shelf. You know, I probably have somewhere between 400 and 500 of these right now on a shelf. And, you know, it's within a year, I'll come back and finish turn it. You know, and then of course, we'll have something like this. You know, these are, you can see everything I brought still in process of finishing. I sell everything I make, and I keep very little at the house. I wish I had more big stuff to bring down, but I didn't today. So, you know, the shape is not super important. You just want to leave it thick enough that you can pick that shape later and have the basic shape within what you feel is right for you. You know, I always prefer smooth, graceful curves, foot to rim, with few transitions and certainly no hard transitions. It's just my personal opinion. I've made things that I come off the lathe and it just doesn't work for me. They sell just as well, so everybody has a slightly different thing in their mind of what good form is, what looks good to them. So even if you don't like it, if you make something, even if you don't really care for the shape, there's probably someone who still is going to love it and enjoy it, as long as the quality is good. So I noticed some people had some elm bowls over here, some difficult grain. Elm is challenging when you turn it dry, so I'll talk about a few things you can do to kind of get through that difficult grain so you don't have to sand so much later. But if you turn much elm at all, you'll know that frequently when the grain shifts, it wants to tear out. So we'll talk about how to get through that. But on here, it's a smooth enough curve. For a rough out bowl, it's really smooth enough. I could just put the foot on here, take it off and not worry about it. We'll smooth it out a little bit just because it looks ugly. So to make the foot, I always use a 3/8 spindle gouge. And all I'm going to do is just cut it straight in with my taper. As I get to the end, I close it up. So I'm going to start with the tool open because it cuts easier. Go all the way towards the foot, and then I'm going to close it completely so that I can get a straight cut. So a lot of people use like a little skew, on its side. That'll cut it real easily. But you can use a gouge just fine, provided that you start with it open. And then when you get towards the corner here, you have to close the gouge. If you leave it open, it's going to cut the curve of that tip all the way in where your chuck has to touch. And then, of course, your chuck will not touch up front here on your outer edge, which is really important. That's what keeps it from racking in the chuck. So you need to taper. And then when you get all the way up, I'm going to rotate it in, close it, and then drag it out. And I do that because it's quicker. I keep this is always near the lathe. When I'm doing a lot of bowls, I can make that cut quicker than finding my little skew and putting that to it. All right, so I'm just going to smooth the curve out here. So we've had push cuts, which is what I did all my initial cuts were, where you have the tool back. I guess you could call it a pull because of where I'm physically standing. But we're rubbing the bevel and we're shooting the chips away from the bowl. If I just want to have a hard edge and I want to clean that up, I can close the tool, drop the handle down. I'm going to cut on the bottom wing. So the wood's going to come around, go right past the top wing. It's not going to touch it. And it's going to cut on the bottom wing. It's a light cut. We usually will use this in finishing. You can't take a heavy cut. It works better with a large tool because it doesn't jam as easily. So I have a lot of problem in class. We have all 1/2-inch gouges, and everybody wants to clear that with their finger, and the jams a lot. So I give out a few Band-Aids, it seems like, from students who cannot get in their head that you should use something else to clean a knife off. But it's a common problem. So on a shear cut, it's going to give you an extremely smooth cut. It makes no difference on a rough out, but I can just get my bowl a little more rounded over. I'm not overly concerned. You can see right now I've got some hard edges. All that'll go away when I finish the bowl. I don't have to worry about that now. So now the outside's done. If you're doing this at home and you're by yourself, it's maybe 3 minutes you could do the outside of this bowl once you've done a few of them and you just know the process because you're just going to do it kind of blindly. Any questions? Everything make sense? All right, so let's flip it around. We'll do the inside. I brought my coring tool, but I forgot my lathe's 30mm tool post, so I can't use it. Normally I would core my bowls. For one thing, it's quicker, so I can knock the core out of the center of a bowl a lot faster than I can take the chips out. So what I'll do at home is I might make 40 or 50 that I get this far. So right now I've got 4 great big Rubbermaid stacked 4 high, full of bowls just like this that I made last weekend. Yes, sir.
What coring system do you own?
I use the McNaughton. The small blades are very easy to use. So for sure, if you ever buy the McNaughton, make sure you get the mini set or whatever they call it, because for like the like if you turn burls or anything that's figured, it's worth making that small bowl. So sometimes I don't feel that a core out of this is worth me doing. So what I do is I knock these out and I take them to Crafter Lamps and we turn them at school. So on a standard wood, bowl like this, for functional bowls, for me to sell, the small ones I have to sell too cheap for it to really be worth my time to make them. So this is about the smallest bowl I make many of. I always make a few small ones. It's kind of like your loss leader. People talk about You know, you're giving something away cheap to get people in and then hope they buy something more. So I do that with the small bowls. Every once in a while I'll make a dozen of them or so. And then people who come in and maybe they can't afford the larger bowls, they'll still buy something small, and in the future they might come back and buy something a little bigger.
What is a coring system? I'll ask a stupid question.
Sure. So basically what that allows me to do is I take a tool like this, and it allows me to cut in and knock the center of that bowl out so I can make another bowl out of the center. So on something like this, I could probably get 2 cores out of. In my normal use, I would just make one, take it to Craft Alliance, and we'd use it for practice. But on a burl like this, some elm burl, I might make 5 bowls out of the center of this, at least 4. Because, burls, I can't find burls free. If you find a good source for free burls, let me know, I'll help you out with it. But I haven't found that yet. So, I buy burls. These we bought from a fella down in Salem. My uncle and I drove down there last year, and someone came up to me at a show and said, hey, I know somebody that has burls, and you might want to sell them. So I called him, and he did. Turned out to be, I knew his brother. I didn't realize it. I got down there, and he started telling me his name, and I realized who he was. And he did not give me a deal, though. But I had hoped when I made a connection there, maybe he would.
What do you sell your small bowl for?
Something like this would be about $40. For functional, so my functional bowls, I sell some of them through retailers, but I mostly sell them direct, because if I sell them through retail, I do wholesale them. Which way was that? I would not. A parting tool in itself, they make a tool that goes in a bigger handle that's similar to a parting tool, like Johannes Mikkelsen makes one. It's just a straight cutter. And you could go through here and knock a cone out. But a parting tool itself is really not designed for that cut. The way it's sharpened is not proper, and most likely you'd have a lot of problems, and you'd probably throw it off the lathe. I doubt you'd even get through it. So I would not try it. A lot of people would, but I don't think I would. Probably a better chance of you hurting yourself than anything. But if you're interested in doing a simpler one, McNaughton sells a straight cutter that's designed for doing the cones. Mikkelsen sells one, or Michelson, and it goes under your shoulder so you get a little bit of grab. I like this system because it's trapped, so like the other systems you got to hold under your shoulder. I don't want that. I don't want all that strain on my shoulder. I want the captured tool rest here to take all that force, so when you use this, it's more difficult than the one-way. If anyone has the one-way system, it's much easier to use than this, I feel. Part of it's just because I make a lot of these, but I don't do this all the time. If you ask Mike Mahoney, he'd probably tell you that system's, he could do it with his eyes closed. He's very good at it. But the one-way system's a little more captured and might be a little easier. All right, so I'm gonna back this out of the way. Keep an eye on time there. So on the inside of a bowl, it's the same thing, but all of our cuts now, instead of going from the foot to the rim, are going to go from the rim to the center. That's going to give us the smoothest cuts. The same theory. On the inside of the bowl, your supported grain is going to be deeper into the bowl versus outside. Now, if you do some strange, if you curve the bowl in, then it's actually the opposite, but I would still, no matter what, make all your cuts towards the center. It's going to give you the best cut in almost every situation. Always check it, make sure it spins by hand. You spin it around, make sure that the wood is touching the outside of your jaw. As long as you're touching on the outside here, you have it cut properly and it's not going to rack on you any. All right, so don't really have any vibration. Now you notice I switched to a different tool. At home I do use the bigger tool on the inside, and I'll try to hog it out, but we can't take that big a cut here anyway. And this is what I use for all my finished cuts. So this is a double grind. So basically I have an 1/8 inch bevel ground all the way around, and then maybe I should be paying attention to, which one's up there? Oh, there you go. So I've got about an 1/8 inch bevel ground all the way around the tool, and then I just grind the back side off. So I'll just take it against the wheel and I'll just rotate it back and forth and cut behind that bevel and remove the steel that's behind it. That gets rid of the heel. So if you look at my larger tool, it's got a large heel right here, and that makes it more difficult to go around a curve than it does with this one, where there's very little, if any, heel. So this allows me to take this tool and cut around a curve with very little stoppage or pushing off. So if you get that tool and you try to get into too tight of a curve, that heel will start dragging behind your cut, and you'll either put marks. It's real noticeable in cherry, where you'll burnish behind the cut, where that heel starts dragging. You'll get these lines around your bowl, and this will take care of that, where you don't have that. It's got such a smooth transition between the bevel and the metal behind it that you don't get that drag. So same thing. First thing I'm going to do is just cut down, level it off, make sure where my rim's going to be is nice and smooth, and then I'll start hollowing it out. I'm a little high. I want to be able to come in right on center, so I'm going to drop the tool rest. I have a curved tool rest, and in fact I brought it, but I rarely do I use a curved tool rest. I only use that when I'm doing something like 20-inch diameter or 21 and you're trying to get way down in there in the center. Then my curved one-way tool rest that's a little longer really helps with that. Let me back this up. So all my cuts are going to go towards center. We'll get this elbow getter out of here. My arms are a little longer than most. There we go. I use the one-way center, or actually that's made by Jet. It was a knockoff. I think they quit making it probably because they made it look exactly like one-ways. But if you ever buy a new live center, I'd highly recommend either a one-way or the one-way style. It'll become more apparent later on as to why it's handy. So right now, the most challenging wood to get rid of is always the center. Because when you get closer and closer to the center, you have to have the cutting edge right on center. Otherwise, you go above or below. Sometimes you'll swing under, it'll pick you up, bring you around. Yes, sir?
If a guy didn't have as many gouges as you've got, he had just one that he really liked, if he cut the heel off that, would he ruin it for any other application?
No, previously, this was the only tool I had. So previously, all my bowls were made with these two tools. The only reason I switched, and that's a 3/8 spindle and a 1/2-inch diameter bowl gouge with the heel cut off. The only reason I switched to that is because I can take a 3/4 inch shaving with that tool, and I can move stock very fast. So when you're trying to sell, you have to start thinking a little bit different, about what you're doing, because you start equating time, and as soon as you start equating time to what you're going to price it as, you want to figure out ways to shave off, especially on the rough out. The rough out, you're doing very little. There's very little design work going on. The quicker you can rough them out, the better. If you're not selling, don't worry about that. So the biggest cut I'm taking, maybe a 1/4 inch. If we use the other tool, the way I have this ground, you really can't take it's not even possible to take a 3/4 inch grind with this particular tool because of the way I've wrapped around the cutting edge. So that does, the cutting edge is kind of tilted in more, so on an Ellsworth grind, it's kind of straight up. And that's why that wing is in the way. And a lot of people will get it caught because as they're going through the gouge, they'll roll it open. You're having trouble getting the cut to start. Well, everyone realizes early on, the more I open that tool, the more cutting edge is presented to the wood and the easier it cuts. So what happens is you're going down the bowl and you're having trouble and you just keep opening it, and then eventually you open it enough that side wing catches and it grabs it. Well, on this one, I'm 100% open, but I've got that cutting edge wrapped over, so it can't come in contact with the wood. That's why this is a very safe grind. Johannes Mikkelsen was the one that taught me about this. I mean, there's been plenty of people doing it before he has, but when you do hats, there's a couple spaces you got to really get way deep down in there. And if you try to use the other grind, it's going to catch both sides of the gouge, and then that'll be end of your hat. So he taught me how to use this, and I just adapted it to everything I do. And since I did that, I found there's a lot of people that have adapted this particular grind to almost everything they do. So let's see if we can get rid of some wood. So all my cuts always going to go towards center. I always have the gouge pointed this way. Don't roll the gouge towards you. You know, that's another thing I see a lot of beginners do when you have trouble finding a cut. They rotate the gouge towards them. They're trying to pull it towards them. Don't do that. You're not going to get a good cut, and depending on the tool you're using, you may have a catch. So all your cuts should go towards the center. All your chips should be going away from you and towards the other person in that lathe if you're at a class, or what I always tell my students, try to cover his back with the chips. That way you know you're doing a good job. I'll take it down to maybe 7/8 of an inch to an inch. You don't need to measure, it's not real critical. You don't want it too thick because it can't lose moisture quick enough to, or you know, if you have it too thick, it's going to lose moisture faster around the outside, not on the center. As it draws in, it'll crack. If you have it too thin, it won't crack, but it'll draw in so far that you can't get a round bowl anymore. You know, so then you can't finish it. So they always, you know, the rule of thumb's always been 10% of the diameter bowl. So if you have a 1 foot diameter bowl, you know, roughly 1/10 of that would be, I guess that'd be 1.2 inches. I always take that even, you know, probably under about 7/8 or a little smaller. I don't have a lot of problem with them getting too oval on me. It's happened, but not very often. So you can see the hard maple cuts very easily. You know, I'm limited on how big of a cut I can take. Part of that is, you know, the lathe and what it will allow, and part of it's the tool I'm holding. Just won't allow much more than about a 3/8 cut, you know, a little smaller. Oops, a little too much for this. So we'll keep going. I'm getting there. If you're new to turning, you should start making a lot of rough outs because it's very good practice. You know, green wood's easy to turn. You don't have all the problems with all the dust to deal with. So it feels good enough. You know, I don't measure rough outs, I just guess. One thing I can tell you on a finished bowl, your fingers are really expensive calipers, but really inaccurate. So don't use your fingers on anything you're finishing. But on something like this, it doesn't matter. Take a few more cuts, get to the center. I used to be concerned about ridges. You know, if I had a little ridge on the inside or outside, I would be concerned that maybe that ridge would develop into a crack. I've never experienced them actually cracking, so I quit being concerned about that as well. All right, so that's probably good enough. I'll do one more cut just to make it a little thinner. And you can see with this tool, it's very easy to wrap the whole diameter of the bowl in one motion. You know, so when you're using something with this short bevel, you can go around the whole bowl from rim to the center, all in one cut. You know, once you learn it, with very little problems. With the bigger gouge, you start to have problems with that heel pushing you off. You know, if you turn a little too quick, turn a little too slow, that heel pushes you off, and it gives you trouble. All right, so on a rough out, this would be done. You know, so this is as far as I would take it. I'd wax it. I'd use the anchor seal they passed around earlier. I'd buy that 6-7 gallons at a time, and we get it through our club as well.
Do you wax the whole piece?
I wax the whole thing. Yep. Some people only wax the end grain, and probably if you do fewer of these, that probably appeals to you a little more because it might dry quicker. For me, I make quite a few of them, so if it takes, you know, a bowl like this, even waxed completely, is not going to take more than 6 months to dry. You know, this size. You know, the bigger you get, the longer it takes. You get up to 18, 19 inches. If you wax it and you really want it to dry, it might take 1.5 years for it to fully dry. And it, you know, those are pretty risky to do in that manner because once you're that big, you're talking about a 1.5 inch to 2 inch thickness wall, and a lot of woods will crack. They just won't make it through the drying process. So usually when I do big bowls, they're always green turned to finish. You know, and I might go 3/8 of an inch down to 1/4 inch if it's going to be functional. If it's not functional, I'll go thinner. But 3/8 seems to be a good finish point for a functional large bowl.
You ever use Turner's Choice?
Turner is, I don't know what that is. So the answer would be no. What is that?
It's a solution that you put them in.
Is that like Pentacryl or something along those lines? I have not. You know, once you start, when you're trying to get through things fast, some of those products really just slow you down because you need, you know, if you think about it, in a weekend I might rough out 60, 70 bowls. So to wax them or have my wife wax them, as it usually is, and stack them is pretty quick and easy for me. But if I switched to a product like that, it'd probably be more expensive because I would need a lot of it. And it would make it more difficult for me than faster. But if you only do a few, you know, I tried the old, what was it, the Dawn soap and water. Has anyone done that? I forgot a bowl in a solution of Dawn soap and water for 2 years in a 5-gallon bucket. I forgot I had done it. And I had a new turner, you know, he came out to the house and he wanted to try that so bad. So I said, okay, fine, we'll do it. So he brought all the stuff to do it, and we made a bowl and we stuck it in there. And we both forgot about it. He kind of got out of wood turning, and a couple years later, he saw me somewhere and he asked about it, and I thought, you know what, I don't even know it. I probably threw it out, and I went home and there it was. So I don't know if it sped up the drying process because 2 years is a pretty long time. But I can tell you it turned out to be a very nice bowl. All right, so now what we're going to do is, so that's my rough out process, start to finish. You know, I'll do that over and over. I do all the backs, you know, so I'll go process wood from a couple logs. I'll bring them home. I'll put them on my bandsaw. I make them all round and stack them up. And then the next process, I do all the backs, and then I do all the insides. So I always do them in batches like that. One thing, if you have a bandsaw, I started using this a couple years ago on my bandsaw blades. You know, so if you cut a lot of woods on your bandsaw green, you get a lot of pitch buildup. And I bought this. It's made by Steel, Hedge Trimmer Blade Cleaner Resin Remover. I bought it a couple years ago. I've been spraying it on my blades since that time. Hasn't ruined my wheels. I thought it might ruin my wheels on my bandsaw, but I sprayed it on my old Jet, and I've got a big Laguna I spray it on now, and it keeps that pitch from building up, and it's never done any damage to my wheels. So for $9, I've had this same can for almost 2 years. It really works well. So if you happen to, it's made by Steel. It's called Hedge Trimmer Cleaner Resin Remover. And I just turn the bandsaw on, spray it on the blade. You know, hard maple is really bad about building pitch up. And a bandsaw is a very dangerous product when you allow it to either dull or get pitch buildup on the back of that blade, because what happens is it becomes very labor intensive to push wood through it, and you'll push and push, and then it'll break free, and then you go. You know, so I went halfway through that finger a couple years ago. Fortunately, I stopped. But it's a good product. It seems to work fine. I won't tell you it won't ruin your bandsaw wheels. I'll just tell you on mine it has not. All right. What did I do with that bowl? Oh, here we go. So now we have a bowl. You know, it's been on the shelf for some period of time. I used to date them. You know, I always would turn them and I'd write the date on them. And at this point, I make so many of them, I don't date them. I have a moisture meter, and I kind of keep them in stacks of, you know, about when I did them. So I'll just take a moisture meter and check them with a moisture meter. As long as they get down under about 12%, then I can finish turn them. And they might move a little bit, but it's an organic material. It's going to move a little bit anyway. You know, anyone who thinks a wood bowl is going to stay perfectly round forever is, you know, probably kidding themselves. All right. So we'll sandwich this here. The block I put on here is just MDF. So it's just a piece of MDF I glued up 6, 7 pieces, cut it round on a bandsaw, stuck a face plate on it, and I put a neoprene foam on the front of it. So all that does allow me to sandwich my bowl here. Yeah.
What kind of glue you got holding that neoprene foam on here?
I bought a roll of this stuff, adhesive backed, for $10 at Superior Steel a long time ago. You know, they had stacks of these great big rolls of these things of neoprene, just neoprene sheets about a foot wide, I don't know, 40, 50 feet long. I've used about 2 feet because it doesn't go bad. So it's already adhesive backed. So I used to use like closed cellular foam you get at Lowe's for putting plates in, and I would just use spray adhesive, like, you know, the Super 77 or whatever it is, work fine. But this stuff works a lot better.
That's just neoprene?
You know what, I'm guessing. It's a black rubber of some sort. I used to use a wetsuit. You know, if you go to a dive shop, they'll often have old wetsuits. If you just go when they're closed to the back and get one out of the dumpster, it's free. If you go in the front door, it's $20, and then they go in the dumpster and get it for you. That's what happened to me. You know, I thought, where's this guy going? And I looked down the long hallway. He's out in the dumpster pulling out a wetsuit to come sell me for 20 bucks. I thought, well, I asked him. I might as well pay it, so I did. So I used a wetsuit for a long time, you know, that I bought for 20 bucks. And now, since I've come across this stuff, it works a lot better. All right, so now we have dry wood. So this has been some period of time. I didn't date it, so I don't know. It's at least 6-7 months old. I'm going to go back and start out with this one just because it's quite a bit out of round. So we want to round it first, and then I'll switch to the other tool, which I can get a smoother cut on. I've just sandwiched it here between the jam chuck and my center. Yeah.
Can you hold that tool down on the tool rest?
How about that?
Yeah. So it's the camera. That's a good shot right there.
Yeah. So it's just a David Ellsworth ground. You know, I bought one of those double cut one-way 5/8 gouges. I ground the David Ellsworth on one side. The other side has my other grind on it. But I found on a 5/8 inch diameter gouge, the other grind I almost never use. You know, so I always use that on the 1/2 inch diameter gouges. On the bigger gouges, for whatever reason, when I'm using the other grind, I don't ever seem to want this size tool. All right, so the first thing's just to level it up. Same thing, all my cuts are going to go this direction, every one of them. My lathe is a short bed lathe, so I can stand here so that I don't eat chips, you know. So on this lathe, I can't stand over there. I'm gonna have to eat them a little bit. I'm not overly concerned with a good cut, but if you notice, I'm not going real fast because I don't want to create a bunch of damage that I got to come back and fix. I want this bowl to some extent be as large as I can get it. If I can do it all in one pass, I will. At this point, I'm hanging over the tool rest a good inch, so you're depending on the size of the bowl, you're pushing the limit. You know, a couple things are going to give you a better cut. The lathe turns faster, you go slower. It's a lot safer that you go slower. So, you know, if you're needing a smoother cut, and you can see this is oak, you know, it's white oak even on the end grain. It's pretty smooth. You know, I've still got some wax here, so I haven't quite got there yet. But I don't really have any problem areas. And the reason I don't is I rub the bevel, I cut the right direction, and I move the tool slowly. You know, so if you get in a hurry and you push it through real fast, or you know, if you see where I started out, I got a little tear out here, and that's just because it's difficult to get this particular tool in the right position with the tailstock in my way. So I'll fix that with the other tool. So now that I've gotten rid of the bounce, you know, which is maybe 3/16 of an inch. It wasn't very far out around. I'll switch to my other tool, which is a little smaller, and will allow me to get a better cut. Any questions?
This is the one with the shorter bevel?
This is the one with the shorter bevel. Let's try this.
There you go.
Can we see that? So you can see the bevel is from the cutting edge to right there. That's the end of the bevel. It's only about 1/8 inch, a little less. And you know, if you have trouble riding that small of a bevel, I can go to the grinder and make it a little longer. You know, so the other thing I really like about this is when you're cutting a finished cut on the inside of the bowl, you really want a bevel that's more blunt across the front, not at a long angle, because it'll allow you to have the handle out here and cut straight across the inside of the bowl. If you have this real steep cut here and you want to rub the bevel, now your handle has to be way over here to cut across the bottom of a bowl, and the rim blocks you from doing that.
So is that like about a 20-degree bevel?
Right now it's probably closer to 40. Yeah. And I might, the only time I'll probably never go to 20, but I might drop it to 30 to go down, you know, so when we do later on we do a bowl, I got to go down the inside edge, and, you know, the kind of a more straight side of the inside of the bowl, and I'm going to want the handle way out here and push it straight down. In order to ride that bevel, I need that angle on the tip of my tool. If I want the handle over here, you know, you can see the bevel changes. You know, so depending on where you want the handle, that bevel has to change. So the other great thing about this particular tool is I hand grind it. I can change that bevel on a moment's notice to fit the bowl that I'm making. Now, you don't want to do that more than you have to, because you know, tools aren't cheap. But you know, Doug Thompson was just here. I buy a lot of his gouges. They're very good. But you know, you don't want to grind them away on one bowl. You got to get at least 2 or 3.
So, and that's a bowl gouge?
It is. It's a bowl gouge. The only thing I use a spindle gouge for is for the foot on a bowl. It's for the foot, and if I want to cut a bead on the rim, I'll use it for cutting that bead. Okay, so now that I got the smaller tool, I'll go ahead, do that. And we're going to go ahead and finish off the foot. We don't want to wait too long before we get this foot set, because if we happen to do something and kick this a little bit out of center, I don't want to have to return the whole bowl. I'll just flip it around and grab it in the chuck where I've already got a good foot, and I'll fix it from when this face the other way. Same thing, cut my taper, close it, drag it out. You know, it's for the side, let's see, for the side right here, which is your flat, you either want it perfectly perpendicular to the lathe or cut in towards the bowl a little bit. Never cut out. If you're cut this way, where the metal will not touch the outside of that bowl, it's going to give you a lot of trouble. On a rough out, it doesn't matter as much, because if the bowl moved a little bit on a rough out, doesn't matter. You're going to fix it later. But on this is a finished bowl, we can't have that. Okay, so now we need to make a little cleaner cut on this first rim. I still want to ride that bevel, but the tailstock is in my way. So to get around that, I'm going to drop the handle way down, and I'm going to cut close towards the tip of the center. And I have the tool almost completely open. And that is just so I can get through that part. If I tried to close the tool like this, I couldn't get through because I'd hit here. So instead of rotating the tool this way to go through that curve, I drop the handle way down, and I don't need as much swing on the tool handle as I would if I had the handle up. So now that I'm here, I'm riding the bevel that I'm cutting well below center right now. And as I get closer to the edge here, I'll pick this cut up, I'll lift the handle up, and now I'm cutting more towards center because I can have a more natural feeling cut towards that rim. I'm not going to move real fast. We'll stop right there. See if I'm before the wax, just barely. All right, so I'm going to leave that as a detail, but I still have to do something with this wax that's here, so I'm going to just kind of cut in a cove. I can do this with a bowl gouge. I'll just go in and rotate out. The key is don't move fast through the cut. The slower you go, the smoother the cut you're going to receive. If it starts to bounce on you, pause. Because if you keep going, the bounce will get progressively worse. So if you start to feel a bounce, if you pause, let the bowl rotate through your tool a couple times. It'll cut, and get you back where it's smooth again, and then you can push forward. And then we can come back and clean up what's left. All right, so let's just see if we got, so I've still got a bad spot here. You can see there's wax. So I've still got to do something on the rim here.
Can I move this in on you?
Oh, sure.
Is that in your way?
Nope.
Give us a little better shot at a cut there.
All right, so I got to make a few more cuts because until this wax is gone here, we're not there. Now what I'll do before I do that is I'm going to level out this front because I don't really know where the top of my bowl is yet. So if I take this, about right there, just go till I'm smooth. And cut slow. This is one of those times when moving slow is going to be faster than trying to push through, because if you try to push through real quick, it'll give you problem areas. Yep.
Do you find that end grain tear out is worse on something like a cherry versus an oak or a maple?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Cherry is a wood that bruises easily, and it's one of those woods that, depending on where it grew, you're going to have a wide variation of how dense that grain is. So on cherry, it's almost from tree to tree, location to location. You know, I'll get some cherries where I can push cuts the whole way, never have a problem. Perfect. Other cherries, I've got to come back with a shear cut to tear out on the end grain. It just depends. You know, one thing, I don't know, we'll do it regardless whether I have tear out or not. This is white oak. White oak cuts beautifully. Red oak's a little more challenging, but if you come up with good white oak, you'll always get a smooth cut. As long as you do a push cut, ride the bevel, you're going to get something really smooth. But cherry can be challenging, and I'll show you something you can do on those problem areas that'll help. So I'm just going to do one more cut, see if I can wrap it in a little more. Take a little deeper towards the rim because that's where my problem is. And then I'm going to go ahead and bevel that a little bit so I don't cut myself on it. One thing as a new turner you'll find eventually is a very thin edge is like a knife. It'll cut you very quickly. Okay, so we're fairly good. We still have, I wouldn't want to shift to sanding right now, even though I don't have tear out. I don't know if you can see, I've got ridges right here. Can we see that? Yeah. So I've got ridges here. So we don't want to sand until all the ridges are gone. It's nice and smooth, and we're really just knocking the grain down. I prefer to start at 120. I stock down to 80 grit. So if I can get away starting at 120, I always do. But I won't kid you. I go through plenty of 80 grit. There's some days, the whole day is an 80 grit day. So it's the same thing. I'm going to drop the handle down. The key here is to do this shear cut and to know that you have the tool in the right position. You want to create a V between the tool rest and the work. You see that? Can you do the overhead shot here if you could on the screen? Is that what's up there? So you see I've created a V here. As long as I'm cutting within that V, the tool will be allowed to be in the proper position. Doesn't mean it's in the right position, but the setup will allow me to. So if you notice, I have the handle way down. And I can cut both directions on a shear cut, and it's going to be almost the same cut. If I continue to come around, the handle lifts. The tool rest forces the handle up. So I can get a smooth cut right here, but as soon as I get to here, the handle starts raising on me. And the further I come around, by the time I'm here, the handle is completely level. I'm no longer shear scraping. That is now a scraping cut, which on a lot of woods is going to be terrible. So the key is to keep moving that tool rest and only work within that V. And as long as I stay within that V, so I can maybe go to there. We'll turn it off, take a look. I'm going to open it up a little bit more so I can get over into here, and I'm going to drop it just so I can cut a little closer to center. But you can see those ridges starting to go away. Handle down. Cutting on the bottom edge, the bottom wing, not the top. It wouldn't cut on the top if I tried, but a lot of people do try. And I can go to about right there the way I have the tool rest set up, and after that it's going to start lifting that handle on me. All right, so I'm going to rotate it around, rub my knuckle a time or two, and now I can pull it almost all the way in. I don't want to go too far because I like that sharp edge. In many cases, after you sand, you have to go back. If you want that sharp edge between the rim and the bowl, you got to go back after you finish sanding because you're going to soften that edge up. Let's see if it's better. It's quite a bit better. All right, so I don't have a lot of tear out. Let's say I did, and I wanted to deal with it. The best thing you can do is to first know what finish you're going to put on it. So if you're going to use a functional finish, walnut oil or mineral oil, use that to do this. If you're going to use polyurethane or a tung oil blend, you can use tung oil. We're going to just say we're going to use mineral oil. And what we would do is wet it a little bit. At home I would flood it. We're not going to do that here because we don't want mineral oil everywhere. And it doesn't really go, and oak is going to soak right in. But let's say I had a problem spot. We'll pretend it's there. And I would just rub it in and just give it a good coat. If you need to put more, put more. It's going to make the first grit a little more challenging to sand because it's going to want to clog the sandpaper. But what that does is it softens those fibers up, and if, on cherry especially, if you have that end grain, you just can't get a clean cut, oil it, come back over it with that shear cut, and after about 2 or 3 times, you'll have a perfectly smooth cut.
What do you feel about sanding sealer? Is that going to do the same job as you want?
I don't think so because I think it dries too quickly, it doesn't penetrate deep enough. So, I finish all my bowls nowadays with mineral oil and beeswax. I used to use walnut oil, but I get walnut oil for 45 bucks a gallon. I buy mineral oil for 13 a gallon. So seemed to be, it's still a really nice finish. The only time I use walnut oil is if I want to darken something, because I don't want to stain anything. So the only time I'll switch over to that. But I've never used a sanding sealer. It might work fine, but for me, this has worked so well, I've just stuck with it. And in most cases, if you use mineral oil, you could still go back over it with other finishes. It would, because you're not leaving a ton on it. We're cutting the surface off. We're going to sand it still. By the time you're done sanding it, you won't even know that you ever used the mineral oil. We're not putting that much on it and waiting for it to soak deep in. All right, so we just take that, we drag it back out. We're just cutting off that top layer where we just applied the mineral oil. And you'd have a smoother cut. We already had a pretty good cut, so you can't really tell. But if we had a wood that was difficult, elm especially. So if you turn elm and you have those areas, especially across the bottom of the bowl where they start to want to tear out, because on elm, when you go, oddly enough, on an interlock grain, you wouldn't think this would happen, but when you go straight across the bottom, a lot of times it wants to start pulling out on you a little bit. So if you just put oil on it, or punky wood, this is pretty soft here. When I do the inside, well, it's not soft, but it's starting to spalt. When I do the inside, I might have trouble cutting down that inside ridge.
You want to use polyurethane finish. What can you use? You can't use mineral oil.
Tongue oil. Yep.
Polyurethane
If,
on over tongue oil?
I would put tongue oil on to make these cuts if you're going to use polyurethane as your finished product. If anyone's ever used the Sam Maloof finish, it's 1/3 tongue oil, 1/3 boiled linseed, 1/3 polyurethane. They blend together well. And they cure fast. It's what I use on most of my non-functional pieces. I don't feel like I have enough taper on this foot, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bigger taper, then we'll flip it around. Of course, we're not going to sand here. At home, I do power sand, so I buy 5-inch disc. If I can, no matter what size bowl, if I can fit a 5-inch disc into it, that's what I'm going to use. I switch down to the 3-inch if I have to. So smaller bowls, I'll switch, or sometimes on a thin bowl, the 5-inch is just too rough on the sidewalls. But a 5-inch sanding disc doesn't cost much more than a 3, and it sands a lot faster. And I've bought them from several companies over the years. They seem to keep going out of business, so I guess they don't charge enough for their products. But I think Keystone Abrasives is who I've been buying them from. I just buy them 100 at a time per grit. That way you get the best price. Let's see, where did I put my chuck? I use Vic Mark chucks, if anybody's curious. Oh, what was that? Well, there you go. It's, I've used, there's a lot of good chucks out there, but Vic Marks, very, very tight mechanics on them. They feel good. They take all my abuse. I haven't bought that massive one they have yet. I keep looking at it and can't seem to get myself to spend the money, but one of these days I will.
How many bowls a month do you sell, approximately?
It ranges. Right now, I'm just now starting to get ramped up, so over the winter, after Christmas, I don't do anything until May. I mean, nothing. I do very little turning other than teaching. It's kind of my break time. All right, we're going to probably drop this on the ground. There, oh, we got it. I had it a little bit off. It probably kicked out on me. But in any given year, I probably sell at least 300. Probably my average. This year, I didn't put in for a single art show. I usually do art shows about every other year. I have a day job, so it gets to be overwhelming. You try to do 7, 8 shows a year, and you've got a few galleries that are looking for work. With a day job, it gets a little overwhelming trying to keep up with products. So,
What's your day job?
I work for BJC Healthcare, which is a large hospital organization in St. Louis, and I manage clinical engineering. So my my department maintains medical devices. So formerly that's what I did. I repaired medical devices. And I started doing this as a hobby to kind of release our woodworking, to release that stress of the daily duties in the medical field. I've always thought someday I might do this full time. Everybody I know who does it full time so far has recommended that I not. So for now I continue to work my day job. I keep telling my wife, if you ever find that job that really pays well, that allows me to be the stay-at-home dad to our dog, maybe then I'll figure out a way to do that transition. But I think she had the same thing in mind, so I don't think that's going to happen for either one of us. All right. So it's the same thing as we were talking about earlier. We're going to try to do cuts all towards the center. The first cut's going to be a little bouncy because it's not round. And then after that, we should be able to smooth it out and make all our successive cuts smoother. I only need, if I only took 2 cuts off this bowl, it would be fine. It'd be a little on the thick side. Maybe it'd be 3/4 of an inch or so. So it'd be a little thicker than what I normally leave it at. But a lot of times you have people that want a little thicker bowl. I don't want to go real fast. Let me get some light in there. Maybe that'll help everybody see.
Can you show where you're actually cutting on that tool?
I am cutting, let's see. Can you see? Right below the tip. So almost all of my cuts are going to occur around the tip, not on the sides. The only time I'm using the sides is when I have the handle dropped, the tool's closed, and I'm trying to do a shearing cut. Other than that, every cut I make is around the tip. So let's see. Yeah, doesn't really get in there very good. But this cut is right below center, so it's from center to as much as about 3/16 inch down the bottom is the whole cut. And the key is don't go fast, rub the bevel. It's not as easy as it sounds, of course. All right, so I'll go to there. Right there has me about hanging over about 2 inches off the tool rest. And I want to stop and just make sure I'm getting a deep cut. Because if you're having problems, you don't want to get 5 cuts in and not realize it. Most of the time, you're going to feel it. So in most cases, if you're getting a bad cut, you will feel it. The tool's going to be bouncing, it's going to be jittering. But you won't always, depending on the wood, especially where I have the sapwood that's got some spalting in it, you may not recognize that the cut's poor until you stop to lay them look. So it's important. You can see as they get down to the bottom, can we see in the bottom? I've only taken a very small amount of wood off. This bowl did not move much at all. I've maybe taken off 1/8 inch if that, and that's all it took to round it. Sometimes you think I grabbed it from the wrong stack. It just wasn't dry yet, but I haven't turned oak in quite a while, so I know that's not the case. All right, so to get to center, as I hold this on center, you can see I'm going to have the tool rest pretty high. The tool handle pretty high. I don't want that. I want my handle down. It's more comfortable. It allows easier access to the bevel. So I'm going to drop this down so that I can cut closer to that center. And I'm not going to worry about the bottom yet. Right now I want to focus. I want to get the side complete the way I want it. If you keep taking wood out towards the bottom and you haven't finished the rim yet, your bowl will get thin down here. It'll close in on you, and then it's too difficult to come back and fix the rim. So you want to work from the outside in. You don't want to make all your finish cuts and then come back and decide, oh, I want it thinner. So we're going to set the thickness first and then move all the way through the bowl with that thickness. So right now I'm maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. I want to take it down at least another 1/8 inch or so. It's a pretty straight cut at the beginning because that's the way my bowl is designed. And I'm going to rotate it around. Let's see how we're doing on thickness. So right now it's pretty even all the way through. So I can start, I'll pick the cut up at that ridge, right where I stopped cutting. So what I'll do is I'll start with the tool past it a little bit. I'm going to back the tool up, and then I'm going to pick the cut up behind it and then push back through. So I'm resting the tool. I had the handle too far towards me to cut, so that the cutting edge is not touching the wood. See that? It won't cut. So I'm going to back it up past, and then I'm going to rotate the handle towards you, which is pushing the cutting edge closer and closer to the wood. And at some point it's going to start cutting, and as soon as it starts to cut, that's the point at which I start moving forward. What that allows me to do is pick up an infinitely small cut and move forward with it, rather than starting out here. If you start out here and just jam it in, you end up creating a new ridge. So we don't want to do that. I just want to get rid of a ridge. So I start here, I'm going to rotate it around right there. It's just, you can just see, I don't know if you can see that, but just barely chips started flying. That's the point I want. Right there. So maybe a 64th of an inch, something like that. The small bevel allows me to take a smaller cut. All right, now that I'm here, I need to go across that bottom. I need to change this angle a little bit. Right now I have it a little too steep. So in order to get where I want to be, it's got the tool way over here. This part of the knob of the aluminum is hitting the tool rest, so it's making it difficult for me to have this in the right position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this, and I'm going to take that top. I keep forgetting we got cameras. I'm going to take that top cutting edge, and I'm going to rotate it this way so that I have a steeper cut. That'll allow me to have the tool in this position and go straight across the bottom and still rub the bevel. So all I'm doing is I'm changing the angle of the grind so that it'll allow me to put the tool handle in the position I want it in. That make sense? All right. So now, I don't know if you can see, but I've changed that to a more blunt tip. And what that should allow me to do is come across the bottom. I'll do two cuts, one to kind of smooth it out and get a little closer, and then the last one to make a finished cut. The bowl's moving a little bit on me, so I want to slow down as I enter that cut, let the wood level out. I want to try to come in right on center, and I'm going to try not to create a divot. For sure I don't want a divot. If I got a little point, that'll sand off pretty easy. But you don't want the divot, and if you do, what you do is you tell people those bowls are so that the salad dressing can collect at the bottom, because that's the way Emerald likes it. I had someone tell me that that's the way Emerald likes it, and I thought, perfect. Every time I have a bowl that dips in the bottom, that one's for Emerald. All right, so there we have, it's pretty smooth. I've got a little bit of inconsistency through the bottom. It would probably sand out, but since we're not sanding today, let's turn it out. If I was at home, I might let that go and go ahead and use 80 grit or 100 grit and go through it, because on a bowl this size with a 5-inch disc, you put 80 grit, that thing will be pretty smooth and round real fast. You're not changing the shape very much, but it will allow you to cut through that very quick, and then you can go 80, 100, 120, and within a minute you've got it perfectly smooth and ready to go. But we're here to learn how to turn today, not sand. So I'm going to start a little further out, rotate that handle over, pick up that cut. I'm going to try to rotate it through as slow as I can, all the way to center. I have a little dip. If I can get that little dip out, I will. All right, not bad. Not bad. The bowl moved on me a little bit. What time have we got? What time do we want to finish this one?
It can be done in about 7 minutes.
7 minutes. We're going to do the foot. So if I was at home, I would just sand it. You know, it would be easier. The bowl's moved a little bit, so when I inserted my next cut, I created a new ridge. So really, to fix this, I had to come all the way back out to the rim and go all the way through the center. But we don't have time to, well, we have time. 7 minutes, come on, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. We're usually late around here, is that what you said? All right, so I'm not going to change the angle of my tool. I could, but I'm not going to. Give me a little more speed. Says 1200 RPMs if anybody wants to know. It's going to chatter a little, so I'm going to have to go very slow. Otherwise I'll just have a more design opportunity. We're just going to make sure. Yeah, it's smooth, even though it don't sound smooth. Sometimes you got to wonder because you know you get that spiral, and even I can't talk that away to you. When you start getting that spiral, you usually have to take a deeper cut to get rid of it. I'm just going to try to keep backing up. The same thing, I'm cutting on the tip down to about 1/8 inch below it. As I get towards the end, I'm going to take a couple cuts just because I got about 1/8 inch there and I don't want to do that all in one pass on the center. Let's see if that's any better. It's not bad, still a little ridgy, but we could sand that out. All right, let's flip it around. Keep misplacing my tools. Odell, come over here. I'm going to have you grab this bowl. We'll damage the rim after we're done with it, not before we're done. Ready? All right.
You don't have to do that with stronghold truck.
Well, or Vic Mark lathe. Yeah. On the Vic Mark lathe that has an indexer, I use it as a stop. So my indexer's not very accurate. I've never used it, but I know it's not accurate because I use it as a stop. And you know that chuck where you have those Tommy bars is very fast, opening and closing. That's why I like them. That's why I probably should buy the new one that has both. Now, one-way's a good chuck. I don't own any, but the club members in St. Louis use one-way chucks. Somehow I had somebody talk me into buying a buddy of mine talked me into buying the Vic Mark lathe, which I don't regret a bit. But instead of buying it from Craft Supplies or Woodworkers Emporium, I bought the one that was original that I didn't know Woodworkers Emporium at the time sold them, but Craft Supplies makes a lot of changes to them. You know, they modify them for the U.S. market. And I wanted the larger tool post diameter. Probably was a mistake because now I can't find tool rails for it very easily. You know, most of these custom ones. Yeah, you got to have them made. Is that right? So I probably shouldn't have done that because I would have been better off had I had all those standard U.S. things. You know, so the pulley showed up. I couldn't find a motor to fit it because I bought just the lathe with no stand and motor. I bought a welder and made my own stand. So it sounded good when the buddy sold it to me. I had it shipped from Australia. It took me 4 months. I probably could have called Craft Supplies and had it in 2 weeks. I don't know. You know, I built a house on a goat hill. That wasn't a good idea either. So we do things over time that we regret. Buying the Vic Mark lathe isn't one of them, but not buying it from Craft Supplies is. All right, so now, well, I'm talking here, I almost made a cardinal sin here. I didn't verify that my bottom is thick enough to know where to put my foot. So if you noticed, we on this one? Put it on the top one if you would. So if I was doing this bowl at home, I would have sanded it from this point all the way to the rim. So if my bottom's thick enough, I would just take the foot off, undercut it, and I wouldn't have to sand anything except the bottom, and I'd be done. It's very fast. That's why I always want to finish the bowl from the outside of this all the way to the rim. So I don't want my bowl to come all the way up to this chuck where the chuck part is going to be exposed. So if I can prevent this from turning into my foot, I want to. But if my bowl's not deep enough, then I need to turn the foot into, or the tenon here into a foot. and I'm going to have to do more sanding and more cutting on the outside of the bowl. So I just want to check it. I didn't measure at all while making it. Probably wasn't the best advice for everybody out there. I got plenty of room. So you can see my thickness here is probably,
You're not on camera, Matt.
oh, I was showing the back side. So I'm 7/8 of an inch, 3, something like that. So I've got plenty of room to undercut it. That's what I want. If I got to that point and I only had a 1/4 inch of wood, then I would have to keep the tenon as my foot.
You don't like making funnels?
No. Although every bowl that I have in use at my house has an extremely thin bottom. Those are the ones my wife gets. She's got a few. Okay, so how tight I'm going to make this, I turn the lathe on, I hold and stop the bearing on my tailstock, and I tighten it until it wants to break away from my fingers. That's another thing Hannes teaches you when you're making the hats, because you're trying to flip the hats around, you don't want to punch the top in. So this is how he taught us to do that. It works great for bowls, especially thin turn bowls. So now it just wants to break. I can still stop it, but it wants to break away from my fingers. That's the right amount of pressure. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of that whole tenon. We're going to use that same 1/2 inch gouge. If you notice, the whole bowl really is made with this gouge. The big gouge I just mostly use for roughing out, for very uneven cuts when you have a really oval bowl. But I don't need that big of a tool for most of what I do. Rough outs, it's nice because you're just trying to get through them. Well, not as a beginner. As a beginner, your rough outs you should be learning. But once you do a lot of them, you're just making them so that later on you can make them again. So the first thing I do is just get rid of the majority of the wood. Now I'm just going to clean the outside edge up that's going to touch the table. I'm really just making a scraping cut. I've got the handle up too high to be a shearing cut. I'll take a ruler, verify that it's undercut. I can see that it is, but always check it. Take a ruler or something, make sure you've undercut it. The last thing you want to do is take the bowl off, set it on the table, and it rocks. And if you leave enough room to undercut it quite a bit, I'm going to grab another tool we'll use in a minute here. Go inside that box. There's a little palm gouge. It's a little gouge, brown handle. All right. We'll use that in a minute. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I've undercut that. I would cut this in a little bit closer before I sand the bottom, just to give me as much access to the wood that's going to be seen as possible. And it's easier to do with a small tool. And now at this point I would sand the bottom all the way up through 320 grit. The other thing I do on the lathe with all of my bowls is I wet them. So when you make bowls one at a time, it's harder to do because you want to get it done. But when you make a bunch of them, I can wet this one completely. Before I'd taken that foot off, I would have soaked the whole bowl with water with a wet rag and raised the grain after I sanded it. Set it on the table, let it dry. I'd make another bowl, and later on, once they're all dry, I put them back on and I sand them inside and out again with 400 grit. So what that does is saves you a lot of time later. If you ever finish with mineral oil or walnut oil, the grain is going to raise. The first time whoever you gave it to washes it. So if you don't do it for them, they're going to call you and say, these bowls feel like sandpaper. I did that luckily to someone I knew early on. They bought 4 or 5 bowls from me, and they called me the next day and they're like, this is nowhere near what it was yesterday. And it's because I had not raised the grain.
Do you ever raise the grain to be natured alcohol?
I don't, no. And it might work, but it costs more than water. And I think a lot about, when you're doing production and you're selling, everything you're buying, you're thinking about it. And water seems to work pretty good.
Time though,
It would be quicker, yeah. Well, what I do is, because I'm making them in batches, I might finish 30 bowls in one day. So it's nothing for me to wet this one, set it aside, rough out the next, do the next one, rough it, set it aside.
You put the bowl back on with the 400 grit and soak in the water?
Yep. That's why I leave the tenon on. Yep, yep. It's just quicker than hand sanding it, yeah. There might be I probably need to hire one of those, you know, those black belt Six Sigma people they have at the hospital to come over and look at my process. They probably could shave a few steps out of my process. So now I'm going to cut, now that, you know, we're sanded, we're ready to go, we've already done everything we need to do. We're just getting it off the lathe now. Just so I do it while I'm on the lathe, I'm going to turn this to a point and snap it off. A lot of people will take a bandsaw and, you know, not a bandsaw, but a hacksaw blade and cut it off, or like a Japanese saw. For me, I've found it's just as easy, just as quick. Cut it down to a point, score it. Now never with the grain. You always break this. If you go with the grain, you might grab a piece of the wood on the foot and strip it all the way to the edge. But if you go across the grain, snaps right off, leaves you a little spot there, and that's where a palm gouge comes in hand. So a palm gouge is nice because it's got a short handle. And the way you use this is you always have your palm rested on the workpiece. And what that does is it limits the movement of your hand. So it's much more difficult to hit your other thumb if you can only move that far, right? I can keep my thumb out of that distance. When I'm up here, I got full movement everywhere you want to go. It's hard to keep the rest of your body out of there. So from experience, not of my own, but I have a friend who used like a regular Maples gouge to do this, and we had to go get 3 stitches. But you can see, you know, because wood, it doesn't cut, and then there it cuts. So if you have your hand up, you're putting pressure, who knows where it's going. If you keep your palm down, it's the same with the bandsaw. If you're going to cut wood on a bandsaw, keep both palms on the steel. And as you're pushing, if it doesn't go, and gives a little bit, you got resistance. You don't just fly into the blade. You know, so now that one's from experience. And I can carve it off. It leaves a nice little carved mark. I just consider that my my mark. Yeah, and I'm done. So now we would assume it was sanded. We'd finish it with mineral oil. I'd put about 3-4 coats on it over a couple nights, and then I'd come back. I've got mineral oil with beeswax that I just mix on the stove together, and I keep it in a jug, and then I put that on it for the final finish.
You use drugstore mineral oil?
I buy it from, and it's the same thing. You could buy that. I buy it from bulk. Was it apothecary, something like that. Online, $13 a gallon, and it might cost another $8 for delivery. I can't remember, but it was a lot cheaper than going to a drugstore and getting it. But I use a lot of it. But if you just use a small amount, you know, or if a couple people got together, you know, for a very low amount of money, you could get a couple gallons and split it up. But mineral oils, I don't think it matters where you get it. I started out buying at Walgreens, but it was too expensive compared to what I can buy it in bulk. Any questions? Yeah.
The mineral wax and beeswax, you buff that out?
Yeah, just by hand. Yeah, just by hand. And these don't, you know, if you look at these bowls, I've got two different finishes. So this bowl here is sycamore, very spalted. It was pretty soft. So on any wood that's relatively soft like that, that's going to damage easily, I put that blend on it. I buy it from Rockler, pre-blended. It's easier. Tung oil, polyurethane, boiled linseed, blended together. It soaks in, it hardens. You put about 4 or 5 coats. This one's got about 2 coats on it, so I still got a couple more to go. These other ones just have mineral oil, and I'll put that beeswax on top of it. So any wood that's not spalted or it's a little harder, I just use mineral oil and beeswax. And if it's a product I got to sell in a gallery, then I use the tung oil if it's non-functional, just because a mineral oil finish needs maintenance. It's not maintenance free. You know, so over time you'll need to reapply it, whoever buys the bowl. So they need to know that.
Okay. How about